Maligayang bati sa inyong lahat ng mga kapatid sa Bambang at sa iba pang dako mula sa mga kapatiran dito sa San Juan at gayon din sa pamilya Ponce de Leon, si inyong Ate Oops at saka si Albert. Ang ating mensahe mula sa salita ng Panginoon sa araw na ito ay Hope through Uncertainties. Pag-asa sa gitna ng kaalinlanganan. At kukunin natin ang mensahe ng Diyos mula sa buhay ng isang binata. Si Joseph, anak ni Jacob, si Jacob, sa aklat ng Genesis. Itong si Joseph, noong 17 years old siya, dumating sa buhay niya ang 13 taon na grabing up and down sa buhay niya na parang gulong na umikot-ikot. Maaari nating pamagatan ang mensaheng ito na ang gulong ng buhay ni Joseph. So mag-imagine tayo ng isang malaking gulong na sa pag-ikot, nasa tuktok si Joseph sa pasimula. Pagkatapos, nasa gasaan. Magsimula tayo sa ating pagtingin sa salita ng Diyos. Genesis 37 at una nating babasahin ang talatang 2 hanggang 4. Genesis 37, 2 to 4. Genesis 37, 2 hanggang 4. Ito ang mababasa natin at babasahin ko po ito sa English. Sundan na lamang ninyo sa anumang Biblia ang hawak ninyo. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. 17 years old, at sinasabing he was attending the flocks of his family, his father, with his brothers. Pero habang sila ay magkakasama na sumusunod sa kanilang ama, ay nagdadala si Joseph ng hindi magandang report sa kanyang ama tungkol sa kanyang mga kapatid. Ito kaya ay iniimbento lamang ni Joseph o talagang sinasabi niya ang totoo, ang hindi magandang mga ginagawa ng kanyang mga kapatid na tinatago nila sa kanilang ama. Pero anuman ay mamaya ay makikita natin kung ano ang tama. Pero ang nakasisiguro tayo ay si Joseph ay hindi siya mahal ng kanyang mga kuya. Ngayon, naging mas lalong masama ang loob nila nang binigyan si Joseph ng napakagandang robe, napakagandang damit na maraming kulay. Kaya lalo silang nagkaroon ng sama ng loob sa kanya. Ngayon, ituloy natin, basahin natin ngayon ang verses 5 to 11. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Hindi nakadagdag yung mga dreams na yon sa hindi magandang pagtingin ng mga kuya kay Joseph. Ngayon, kung itutuloy natin ang sinasabi tungkol kay Joseph, ganito naman ang nakikita natin. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." And Joseph replied, "Very well." So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" Joseph replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" And the man answered, "They have moved on from here. I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Let's kill him and throw him into one of these wells or cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Well, ito ngayon, ang makikita natin na talagang hindi maganda ang pagtingin ng mga kuya kay Joseph. Pero si Joseph naman ngayon, kahit mag-isa siya, ay masunurin. At wala siyang takot sa kanyang mga kuya. Tila malinis ang kanyang isip o konsyensya patungkol sa kanila. Pero nabuo na sa kanilang isip na siya ay kanilang papatayin. Wow! So ngayon, kung itutuloy natin ang kasaysayan, ang kanilang pinaplano ay mukhang mangyayari. Ito ngayon ang mababasa natin. Sa talatang 20, verse 20 at sumusunod, "Come now, let's kill him, and throw him into one of these wells, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben, the eldest, heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern or well here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe that he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the well. Now the well was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And his brothers agreed. And so we find that he was now going to be in the hands of these traders. And when the Midianite or the Ishmaelites, they're the same people, they came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern or well and sold him for 20 shekels of silver, who took him to Egypt. What do we see of the wheel, yung gulong ng buhay ni Joseph? Primero, nasa tuktok siya, nakaupo siya sa ibabaw ng gulong. Paboritong anak, kahit na masama ang mga loob ng mga kuya niya sa kanya, pero maganda ang kanyang buhay. Pagkatapos, siya ay binenta sa mga traders, sa mga slave traders. So, nung si Joseph ay nakaupo sa tuktok ng kanyang gulong ng buhay, biglang umikot ito at si Joseph ay nasagasaan. Umikot ang gulong at si Joseph ay nasa ilalim na ngayon. Hindi magandang kalagayan. At sa chapter 39, verses 1 to 6, lulundagan natin sapagkat ang chapter 38 ay walang kinalaman kay Joseph. So chapter 39 tayo ng Genesis. Sinasabi dito, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, one of his officials, the captain of the guard, bought Joseph from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Pero napakaganda ang kasunod na talata. The Lord was with Joseph, and Joseph prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master, Potiphar. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did as a slave, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became Potiphar's attendant and put him in charge of his household. And he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not have to worry about what to do. Yes, he did not concern himself with anything except what he ate. Now, what has happened? Si Joseph ay isang slave lamang, pero bilang isang slave, naging very successful siya sa bahay ng kanyang amo na si Potiphar. At umasenso siya. Siya na ang naging tagapamahala sa bahay ng kanyang amo. Ngayon, ang gusto kong pansinin natin dito sa verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. Now, that's very, very important. Sa makatuwid, si Joseph pala ay hindi pangit ang ugali at hindi malayo sa Diyos. Kahit na galit sa kanya ang kanyang mga kuya, kahit na paborito siya ng kanyang ama, pero ang lumilitaw sa kanyang buhay ay ang Diyos ay nakikita sa kanyang buhay. The Lord was with Joseph. At ang resulta nito, kahit na siya sa pag-ikot ng gulong ng kanyang buhay ay hindi maganda ang kinahinatnan, pero binigyan siya ng Panginoon ng tagumpay. So, umikot na naman ang gulong ng buhay ni Joseph. At ngayon nasa sa ibabaw na naman siya. Dati, pag pumupunta sa palengke, Boy, anong kailangan mo? Sasabihin ng mga nagtitinda. Pero ngayon, iba na. Sir Joseph, anong kailangan mo? Gumanda na ulit. Nasa ibabaw na naman siya ng gulong ng kanyang buhay. At ngayon, tuloy natin sa Genesis 39, sa talatang 6 at sumusunod. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Joseph refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in this house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And those he spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Pansinin natin, hindi sinabi ni Joseph nung siya'y tinutukso, hindi niya sinasabing, "Wag, baka mahuli tayo ng mister mo." Hindi yun. Ang sinabi ni Joseph, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Dito lumilitaw ngayon na nung nabasa natin, the Lord was with Joseph. Si Joseph naman ngayon ay malapit sa Panginoon. Kaya hindi siya takot sa tao. Takot siya sa Diyos na magkasala siya laban sa kanyang Diyos. Ngayon siya ay tinukso. At ang tukso ay hindi lang minsan, maraming beses. Kaya't hindi makakapagsabi si Joseph, "Panginoon, paano naman yan? Inaaraw-araw na ako, hindi ko na kaya to." Hindi. Kahit na inaraw-araw pa siya, ay talagang lumalaban si Joseph. At hanggang sa, eto na ang mababasa natin. One day, he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept left his cloak beside her until his master came home. And then she told him this story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. Nako, talagang binaliktad ng husto si Joseph. Pero, hindi talaga yon ang totoo, ano ha? Pero ito ang malungkot. When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," Potiphar burned with anger. Joseph's master took him, put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Wow! Kinulong. False accusation. Pinaniwalaan ng amo. Kinalimutan na ng amo lahat ng mabubuting nagawa ni Joseph. So, nabilanggo si Joseph. At anong nangyari sa gulong ng kanyang buhay? Umikot na naman. Maganda na sana ang kanyang kalagayan doon sa tahanan ni Potiphar. Ngayon, bilanggo. At nasa ilalim na naman siya ng gulong na sagasaan. Ngayon, ituloy natin. Nasa chapter 39 pa rin tayo. At doon ngayon, sa verse 20 ay hanggang 23 ay ganito ang sinasabi. While Joseph was in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So, nandoon, si Joseph ngayon ay isa ng trustee. Yan ang tawag sa mga bilanggo na pinagkakatiwalaan ng mga superintendente ng bilangguan. Siya ngayon ay naging trustee na at hindi siya nakakulong. Siya ay malaya at siya ay may trabaho pa. Ginagalang din. Ay, ano nangyari na naman ngayon sa gulong ng buhay ni Joseph? Umikot na naman. At isang kawawang bilanggo ngayon ay isang bilanggo na pinagkakatiwalaan at ginagalang. Mataas na ang kanyang kalagayan. Tuloy natin ang kasaysayan habang ini-imagine natin ang gulong na umiikot. At si Joseph ay nasa taas, pagkatapos nasa baba, nasa taas, nasa baba. At ngayon ay nasa taas siya. At ngayon sa Genesis chapter 40 na tayo ngayon at mabasahin natin ang unang 8 talata. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king. Pharaoh, the king, was angry with his 2 officials, the chief cupbearer, or the butler, and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. They were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad?" "And we both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Now, very interesting. And I want you to notice this. Pansinin natin ito sinabi ni Joseph. Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Wow! Do not interpretations belong to God? Ang Diyos lamang ang nagbibigay ng interpretasyon sa panaginip. Pero, nung sinabi ni Joseph yun, ay sinundan niya ng, "Tell me your dreams." Sabihin niyo sa akin ang inyong panaginip. Bakit? Diyos ba si Joseph? Yung ba ang ibig niya sabihin? Hindi. Ang ibig sabihin ay, alam na ni Joseph na binigay sa kanya, somehow, binigay sa kanya ng Diyos ang kakayahan na makaalam ng mga ibig sabihin o interpretasyon ng mga panaginip. Kaya meron siyang confidence na magsabing, "Sabihin niyo sa akin ang inyong mga panaginip." Sapagkat, lumalabas, ay natitiyak kong sasabihin sa akin ng Diyos ang ibig sabihin noon. So, doon sa bilangguan, si Joseph ay nagkaroon na ng paglago sa kanyang relasyon sa Diyos, na hindi lamang niya nakikita na ang Panginoon ay sumasa kanya at nagbibigay ng tagumpay sa kanya, binigyan pa siya ng special gift to interpret dreams. Okay, ngayon, anong nangyari? So, sinabi nila ang kanilang mga panaginip, sa verse 9 at susunod, ganito ang ating nababasa. So, the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is what it means. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, the king, Pharaoh, will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." Yun ang request ni Joseph sa cupbearer. "For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in prison or the dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a good interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream, and on my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." That was the dream. And Joseph said, "This is what it means." On the third day, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer, the butler, to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But the Pharaoh hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. Talagang ang kakayahan ni Joseph sa mag-interpret ng mga dreams ay pinakita niya dito. Ngayon sa verse 23, itong nababasa natin, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph when he was already in the palace. He forgot Joseph, who was still in the prison. Well, mai-imagine natin ngayon na si Joseph ay naghihintay. Pero lumipas ang 2 araw, 3 araw, walang balita mula sa palasyo na siya ay pinapatawag na. 1 linggo, 1 buwan, si Joseph ay nakalimutan na. At ang inaasahan ni Joseph na kalayaan ay nawala. Lumipas ang 2 taon, mababasa natin sa chapter 41. So, tingnan natin ngayon. Basahin natin ang verses 1 to 14. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh, the king, had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin heads of grain, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads of grain. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been again a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings." Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them for us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. And when he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Very interesting. Here we see Joseph's humility as well as confidence. Humility. He would not claim any glory or ability for himself. Belonged to God. But after that, he would say that he had the answer from God according to the dream. Well, very interesting. And so we will continue the story. Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dreams, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but no one could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. But 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. We can imagine, doon sa palasyo, ay tahimik lahat. Naghihintay sila kung ano pa ang mangyayari. Pero sa sandaling tumigil si Joseph, ay nagpatuloy naman siya. Natapos na ang kanyang pagbibigay ng interpretasyon. Ngayon, nagbigay siya ng payo. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials, so Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Wow! Wow! Marahil pagkatigil ng hari sa kanyang pagsasalita, biglang nagpalakpakan ng lahat ng mga tao sa palasyo, sapagkat nakita nila ang wisdom, knowledge na ipinakita ni Joseph. Ngayon, ano naman ngayon ang nangyari sa gulong ng buhay ni Joseph? Umikot. At ngayon, nasa na siya? Hindi lamang sa ibabaw ng gulong, nilampasan pa niya. Lumipad na siguro siya sa taas ng kanyang inabot. Sapagkat bilang isang bilanggo, ngayon, siya na ang number 2 man sa Egypt. Oo. At ang pag-ikot ng gulong ay masasabi nating beyond his wildest dreams. Nakatayo si Joseph doon sa palasyo habang nagpapalakpakan ng mga tao. At ang iba pa siguro ay nakayuko. Pero si Joseph ay nakatingin sa taas. At marahil nananalangin siya, nagpupuri sa Panginoon. At sinasabi niya, "Panginoon, ngayon, naunawaan ko na kung bakit mo ako pinayagan na dumaan sa katakot-takot na mga kahirapan, sapagkat ito pala ang inyong dakilang plano para sa akin, hindi lamang sa kaligtasan ko, kundi sa kaligtasan ng aking pamilya at ng mga tao dito sa Egypt." Kaya ang huling pag-ikot ng gulong ni Joseph ay isang dakilang tagumpay. At masasabi natin na hindi akalain ni Joseph na mangyari yon, beyond his wildest dreams. Teka, beyond his wildest dreams? Aba, hindi ba nanaginip si Joseph? Nanaginip siya na yung kanyang mga kuya ay yuyuko sa kanya? Sa makatuwid, talagang piniprepare na siya ng Panginoon na sa gitna ng mga kahirapan, hindi mawawala ang kanyang pag-asa sa Panginoon. The Lord was with Joseph at binigyan siya ng tagumpay. At iningatan siya kahit dun sa pinakamahirap na kalagayan ng kanyang buhay. Ang Panginoon ay kasama niya. Naging matagumpay siya. At siya ang gagamitin ng Panginoon para ihanda ang mundo. Hindi lamang ang Egypt, kundi ang mundo para sa darating na 7 taon ng tagutom na kasunod ng 7 taon ng kasaganaan. At kailangan yung 7 taon ng kasaganaan na yan ay maingatan para walang masayang at maging handa ang bayan sa 7 taon ng tagutom. Kaya't, mga minamahal, dito natin makikita kung papanong si Joseph ay pinadaan ng Panginoon sa napakabibigat ng mga yugto sa kanyang buhay. Preparasyon yan para sa dakilang gagawin ng Diyos sa pamamagitan ni Joseph. Ngayon, bilang pagwakas ay gusto kong tingnan natin ang talatang Jeremiah 29:11. Ang sabi niya, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Nakakatuwa po at dito po tayo magwawakas. Si Joseph ay nagkaroon siya ng asawa sa Egypt bilang number 2 man sa buong kaharian. At doon sa kanyang pamilya ngayon, nagkaroon siya, sa kanyang pag-aasawa, nagkaroon siya ng 2 anak. At itong 2 anak niya to ay binigyan niya ng special na meaning ang kanilang mga pangalan. Ang una ay si Manasseh. Ang ibig sabihin ng pangalang Manasseh, sabi ni Joseph, God made me forget all my troubles and all my father's household. Ang Panginoon tinulungan siya na makalimutan lahat ng kanyang mga kahirapan. Pati ang kanyang pamilya nakalimutan niya. Hindi yan ang ibig sabihin nun. Kundi siya ay tinulungan ng Panginoon sa kanyang homesickness. Totoong maho-homesick siya sapagkat mahal na mahal siya ng kanyang ama. At pati ang kanyang mga kuya. Pero natiis niya na napahiwalay sa kanila. Mag-isa siya. Pero ang Panginoon ay ang kanyang sufficiency, kasapatan sa kanyang buhay. At ang Panginoon ay pinatunayan na hindi siya nagsisisi sa kanyang pagtitiwala sa Panginoon. Yan ang ibig sabihin ng pangalang Manasseh. Ang pangalang Ephraim naman, ang pangalawang anak niya, ang kanyang pangalan, ang ibig sabihin ni Joseph ay, God made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Naging mabunga ako sa lupa ng aking paghihirap. Kaya kung tutuusin, ang mensahe ng ibig sabihin ng 2 anak ni Joseph ay para sa atin din. Na kahit na anong dadaanan nating paghihirap sa pag-ikot ng gulong ng ating sariling buhay, ang Panginoon ay kasama natin at hindi tayo pangingibabawan, dadaigin ng ating mga kahirapan. At kahit na nag-iisa tayo sa buhay, kasama natin ang Panginoon. At kahit na sa panahon at lugar ng kahirapan, tayo ay gagawin ng Panginoon na mabunga sagana para sa Kanya. Ang sabi ng Panginoong Hesus sa atin, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. Kaya tayo naman, kahit na tayo'y nahaharap sa mga sitwasyon na hindi natin alam kung gaganda ang kalagayan natin o sasama, alam natin ang Panginoon ay nangako ng kanyang presensya sa lahat ng kanyang mga anak at iingatan tayo at pagtatagumpayin tayo at pagbubungahin tayo. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na palaging maganda ang buhay natin. Pero kahit dumaan tayo sa kahirapan, ang Panginoon ay naroroon at bibigyan tayo ng tagumpay. Pagpalain ng Panginoon ang mensaheng ito sa ating mga puso.